And welcome everybody to another edition of the GSMC Football Podcast brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. As always, I'm your host Kenneth Grunfelder, and it's great to have you guys here on this Monday, September 2nd. We have a lot to talk about on the show today, but before I get into that, just want to remind you guys to tip or donate, get your comments recognized. Go to the $ icon in the chat. By doing this, you will create a super chat that I will acknowledge during the live broadcast, and it just makes the show more lively, more interactive between me and you guys. That's really what it's all about. Any contribution that you can make to the show means the world to us as we put out content each and every day. And also the other way to help out the show is also by going to the link at the bottom of the show segment on the ticker, GSMCpodcast.net. And again, we really appreciate however you can help us out as we give you guys content every weekday. So I hope everybody's doing well. Hope everybody had a good weekend. Happy Labor Day. So let's get into what we are going to discuss for today. So we're going to start off the show, believe it or not. We are going to talk about college football. I'm going to kind of go through, some of the games, some of the top performances from over the weekend. So also talk about the game tonight. Florida State plays tonight. So we'll talk about that. All college football to start off the show. So there you go. Then in the second part of the show, we'll take a look ahead to Thursday's opening matchup in the NFL between the Kansas City Chiefs and the Baltimore Ravens. So I'll kind of just talk about Lamar Jackson and Patrick Mahomes, the history between these two quarterbacks. So that'll be the second part of the show. Then we'll talk about Jamar Chase, a little bit more of what's going on with that situation, the kind of contract that he wants, according to some reports out there. We'll talk about Deshaun Watson. I know I brought this up last week, but the Browns restructured his contract, so I wanted to talk about the impact of that, how much cap space was cleared up with that. And then I'll give you my predictions for the NFC South. So that'll be how we wrap up the show today. So let's get into the first topic, which is talking about what happened over the weekend in college football. So, first of all, again, it's amazing how different it is between college football and the NFL because there were a lot of blowouts. And when I mean blowouts, like teams really just dominated against inferior opponents. Because I can't tell you how many games. Obviously, if you're watching this and you're a college football expert, you know. But just looking at some of these lopsided scores, like Arkansas scored 77 points on their opponent on, I think it was Thursday. But, just going through some of these scores. Tennessee over Chattanooga, 69-3. Maryland, 50-7. Over UConn. Purdue won their matchup 49-0. Washington State 70-30. Alabama won their game. I think it was 63-0. Yeah, 63-0 over Western Kentucky. Texas won 52-0 over Colorado State. Ohio State won 52-6 over Akron. Just so many lopsided scores. But I did want to talk about, and Louisville won 62-0 in their game as well. But I wanted to get into some of the top performances from over the weekend as well, because there's a few I wanted to highlight. The Boise State running back had 6 touchdowns. Aston Jeanty, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. 267 rushing yards and 6 touchdowns on 20 carries. He had an unbelievable game, and that was a high-scoring game between Boise State and Georgia Southern. The final score of that game, I can find it because I'm looking. Oh, another blowout game. Auburn winning 73-3. I'm trying to look for that game and I can't find it because there's just so many games were played on Saturday. I'm trying to look for it, but yeah, that was a very, very high scoring game. But yeah, 6 touchdowns in that game. Yeah, 56-45. The final score of that game was 267 yards, like I said. Also, their other running back, Sire Gaines, he had 12 carries for 110 yards and a touchdown. So 7 rushing touchdowns in total. So Boise State won that game 46-45 over Georgia Southern. So that was one of the more exciting games of the weekend. And Georgia Southern was a 13-point underdog. But yeah, I wanted to highlight his performance. Also, Alabama's freshman receiver had a day. 17 years old. Ryan Williams, 2 receptions for 139 yards and 2 touchdowns in Alabama's win over Western Kentucky. 63-0 they won. Jalen Milroe, 3 touchdowns, 200 yards passing. Also had 2 rushing touchdowns as well. So that was another performance I wanted to highlight. And then also for Arizona, I wanted to highlight their receiver as well. Well, first of all, their quarterback, Noah Fafita, 422 yards, 4 touchdowns and a pick, and this was against New Mexico. But their receiver, Tetsuroa McMillan, and when I was watching the highlights, I kept saying T-Mac, the play-by-play guy for ESPN. He kept saying T-Mac. So he finished with 10 receptions for 304 yards and 4 touchdowns. So, I mean, that's unbelievable. So I just wanted to highlight his performance as well. But some other takeaways I have. So, of course, Alabama, they dominated their game, but I also wanted to bring up Michigan as well. So their game was pretty close for a little bit. And obviously, there's no more J.J. McCarthy. There's no more Harbaugh, no more Blake Corum, Roman Wilson. And they were playing against Fresno State. And yeah, that game was close. It was 10-3 going into the half, but then Michigan took over in the fourth quarter. They scored 17 points in the fourth quarter. But yeah, the defense played well, of course, but the offense struggled a little bit. You had Davis Warren play 15-25, 118 yards, 1 touchdown, and a pick. Michigan ran the ball for 148 yards. Actually, the game got off to a good start for Michigan because Fresno State got the ball to start the game and they threw a pick. And Michigan cashed in and scored a touchdown immediately. So you thought, okay, this game is going to be a blowout. It still ended up kind of being a blowout, but, it took a while. But yeah, they're not the same team. And this week, coming up, they're going to be playing Texas, who just blew out Colorado State 52-0. So that's going to be an interesting game. That's going to be at home. That game is at 12 p.m. Eastern time on Fox. So that could be a game that, gets ugly if their offense plays like it did against Fresno State. So that's just one takeaway. Also, Notre Dame won a big game. Probably the toughest game on their schedule against Texas A&M, and that was a road game for them. They won 23-13. That was an entertaining game. They scored a touchdown with 1:54 left in the game to get themselves up 20-13, and then they kicked a field goal towards the end because I think Texas A&M, they turned it over on downs, so they got the ball back. They ended up winning by 10. But yeah, that's the toughest game on their schedule. They do play Florida State later in the year. They play USC late in the year, but that was the toughest game on their schedule. So that was big for them to get that win, obviously with the playoffs expanding this year. So that was another good game. And then also, of course, I wanted to get to, again, so many games, but I did want to get to the game last night between LSU and USC. And that was probably the best game of the weekend. So both teams obviously have new quarterbacks. The number 1 and number 2 overall picks in the NFL draft, Caleb Williams and Jayden Daniels. They're both playing in the NFL now, so they were debuting their new quarterbacks. For USC, you had Miller Moss, and then for LSU, you had Garrett Nussmeier, and they both played well. Moss went 27 to 36 for 378 yards and a touchdown, and Nussmeier went 29 to 38 for 304 yards, 2 touchdowns, and a pick. Now, Brian Kelly had some interesting comments at the end of the game. So the first one he said is talking about Miller Moss. He said he outplayed our quarterback, and I know, and Bleacher Report posted his quotes, and that there were a lot of comments saying like, why would you say that? I mean, it's not like their quarterback didn't play well. I mean, he did throw a pick, but Nussmeier played well too. And then he also said, what we're doing on the sideline is feeling like the game's over, and I'm so angry about it. So, yeah, he was not happy with the effort towards the end of the game because USC got the ball back, and it looked like, they were going to line up and kick a game-winning field goal, but that was not the case. They ended up getting a rushing touchdown. Woody Moss scored the game-winning or Woody Marks, sorry, scored from 13 yards out. But, yeah, Miller Moss, he's he could have went to a different school and got a chance to start, but he sat behind Caleb Williams. In his bowl game, the bowl game he played last year, I think he had 6 passing touchdowns. So this was his, second career start, and he looked good. And there was that insane one-handed catch during the game, and that was by one of the receivers on USC. It was unbelievable. I mean, it was Odell-esque, that catch. And I'm trying to see if I can find it. But yeah, it was unbelievable. So that was by Kyron Hudson in the first half, and he had 5 receptions for 83 yards. But Miller Moss at the end of the game was very emotional, because he sat behind Caleb Williams and finally gets his opportunity on a big stage, and USC gets the win. And like I said, very entertaining game. And next week they take on Utah State. Then they play Michigan the following week, and that's going to be at Michigan. They play Penn State later on in the year. They play Notre Dame at the end of the year. So, but yeah, good start for their young quarterback. And then for LSU, they take on Nicholls State next week. So, LSU actually has a really tough schedule. The second half of the season, I mean, they take on Ole Miss, they take on A&M, they take on Alabama, they take on Florida. Vanderbilt got a big win, and then they take on Oklahoma to end off the year. So, yeah, that's they didn't get off to the start they wanted, but yeah, so that's basically the whole week. So tried to cover it the best way I can. Went around to all the big matchups, but yeah, no, it was an exciting week, and then we get the NFL back. So looking forward to it. But let me know what you guys think. What were some of your takeaways from week 1? Let me know in the comments. So we are going to take our first break, and then when we come back, we'll talk about the week 1 matchup between the Ravens and the Chiefs, and we'll talk about the history between Patrick Mahomes and Lamar Jackson. So with that being said, stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast.